This is Daniel. He was 7 years old when he was murdered in his first grade classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary School last December 14th.
Mark Barden, Newtown father in Columbus, Ohio, of all places. He is there talking to state lawmakers about sensible gun laws, since it certainly doesn't seem like D.C. will do much about guns anytime soon. Now, some Newtown parents were at the White House today visiting with Vice President Joe Biden. No photos available. And the Vice President announced that there will be a measure to try and beef up mental health coverage, and he promised funding for it. Not sure if the families will try and lobby lawmakers while in the nation's capital, but if they did, we know what they would say. Again, thanks to Newtown dad, Mark Barden.
I'm going to look at the committee and say, you have an opportunity to prevent another family from going through what my family is going through right now.
Newtown appears to be collectively asking for privacy as the one-year anniversary of the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary approaches this coming Saturday. But some parents, they are speaking out. And among them is Rob Cox, the co-founder of the Newtown group Sandy Hook Promise. He is in the Stanford Advocate newspaper today advocating for greater use of so-called smart guns that only work after a palm print is verified. And he is making that argument an economic one. Quote, like any business, he writes, gunsmiths are always looking for reasons to sell people more guns. Why not make the safety of their products from accidental deaths, suicides, or theft their unique selling point? They might even be able to charge premium prices, as Volvo and Mercedes have done with cars. We've gone through poll numbers on this, Congressman, and the support for universal background checks, for the gamut here in terms of what the changes that were called for in the immediate aftermath of Newtown. They've ebbed since then. Yeah. And while the majority still believe in background checks here, even the majority of NRA members, a lot of the other ancillary things have faded. Is the best window for change past now?
Well, until there's another crisis and another tragedy, and there will be. And then it will come up again and maybe have a little more momentum. You know, there are sensible things you can do with guns. You can have safety locks, you can make sure they're locked up, you can hold adults responsible if others get guns they shouldn't. But in the end, Congress doesn't want to deal with the real issue, in my judgment, and it's the mental health issue. I mean, this was a guy who had serious mental problems and no real answers to it. And that's where Congress, you know, I'd love them to get back to the way they used to operate in the 1970s. You actually had debates, you had hearings on these issues. Congress doesn't have hearings on them. We're not educating ourselves about these problems.
But Congressman, these are the massacres. I mean, deaths occur on a daily basis throughout the country. Yes, the high-profile massacres tend to be the ones that are a little crazy. But overall, I mean, things need to be done in order to strengthen the laws we have to, I mean, listen, I don't own a gun, but if I did, I'd want to ensure that the other guys that own guns didn't ruin it for me, you know, and didn't go out and do something stupid that might affect the gun permit that I have.
So you come down what? For more gun control or dealing with more mental health?
First off, I think the assault weapons ban should be reinstated. There's no need for any citizen to carry an assault weapon that has a massive magazine.
Okay. Put it through originally.
Listen, I think it should be back.
I was the Republican point person, controlled the floor debate on the assault weapon ban. I have to admit to you that an assault weapon is no different than any other semi-automatic. Basically, it's just an ugly-looking weapon. So there are other things that we can do that would have more impact. I got one. It
was Inner and I were talking about this yesterday, which is why would gun owners and even gun lobby groups oppose the following thing, which is I'm not going to infringe on your right to bear arms. However, like in everything else, we have a basic minimum of proficiency that we should expect. If you want to have a car, if you're of legal age and you're not criminally prohibited to have one, you can go buy one. God bless you. But you know, you have to pass a driving test. You have to pass a written test. Right now, you can be blind and purchase a gun. But why can't they be saleable? That the right and the left could get behind it and say it's just common sense.
You know, there are things that the right and left could do. You know, you have constitutional rights. And the government has a constitutional responsibility to regulate that right to make sure it's not abused. So I'm with you on that. But the big problem, one of the problems is, you know, some of the advocates say this is just the first step and we're going to confiscate all weapons. So I'm answering your question this way. Some say stand firm now because, you know, it's the camel's head under the tent.
I think you're looking at the wrong place for change at this point. It's not going to come from Congress. It's not even going to come from any more state legislatures. It's hearts and minds that have to be changed at this point. We've seen after tragedies, you get spikes in the numbers. After Columbine, you got a spike in the number. After Newtown, obviously.
But you know it didn't end translating into policy. Why would it be different than next tragedy?
Because you have to be looking at something more systemic, something like same-sex marriage or something like marijuana legalization, where the numbers have just trended in one direction and only in one direction. It hasn't been a blip. You have to actually change the minds of Americans as opposed to changing the minds of lawmakers at this point. If you change the minds of Americans, the lawmakers inevitably will follow.
The difference is Americans are always insecure about security throughout this country. I mean, whether you're in New York City, which is, I think we would all agree, the terrorist capital of the world for a potential attack, or if you're in like Alabama or the Deep South or something, they always feel threatened, and this is their way.
I didn't say it was going to be easy.
And for cause, I mean, there were times I felt safer in Iraq or Afghanistan than I did in some of our cities. I mean, you know, think of the 25,000 deaths we have just in automobiles. Why aren't we dealing with that? Why?
Well, we're constantly upgrading safety to cars, and why not? I mean, the gun thing.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
Well,
in a car,
second.
wait a second about Congress. Think about it. 20 years ago, how many of us wore seatbelts wherever we went?
Right.
I didn't. Now, if I get in the car and I don't put my belt on, my kids are yelling at me like in echo chambers before I even leave the driveway. Andrew made the point. You got to make it not cool to have the gun. And right now, it's still cool. And I don't know how you approach this.
Why not cameras on highways? I was driving along, and this guy started right in front of me. He must have been going.
Well, Andrew was in a hurry. He had to get to the studio. No.
but you know what? So,
yeah.
Well, we could save a lot of lives that way.
There are cameras. They're just not there for policing. I mean, we're getting off topic.
But it isn't off topic. The bottom line, to me, it isn't. It's an example how we want to deal with what I think is the superficial. I think some of the gun suggestions are superficial, won't make any difference in the outcome, and there are ways that we could deal with some really big problems.
The thing that I think more people agree with what I believe in this statement than don't in this country is we're fighting the wrong fight. You have a right to have a gun, whatever I think of it, okay? And I disagree with it a little bit on the type of gun matters, okay, but that's not the big thing. But with that right should come responsibilities. And right now, there's not responsibilities. I have a gun and I don't secure it and it's used in the commission of a crime? Come on. Ms. Lanza, if she lived, she should have faced prosecution. She created an environment where someone troubled had access to firearms that could take lives.
More guns after
right.
That.
And we veil this and we dress it up in fancy language, but at the end of the day, I shouldn't be able to do whatever I want with a gun. I shouldn't walk in broad daylight with a semi-automatic. I shouldn't be able to walk into a bar and drink and have a gun and have that be legal. I shouldn't go to my church on Sunday with a gun and that be legal. I shouldn't be able to be insane and buy a gun. And all those things we can do here, and we fight on the periphery instead of the main for what we all believe, or the vast majority of us, is just common sense. And I think on one fringe they want to take everything away, and on the other fringe they want everybody to walk around with bazookas. But somewhere in the middle in this country, it just should pass the smell test. And I don't know how we get there, but I think with the sad anniversary approaching here, I just don't think we're any closer. And in some ways, I think, Dominic, 11 months later, we're even farther.
Can I give you one choice? If you could have meaningful mental health services versus gun control, which would you choose?
I don't know. They're either or. But I think that certainly mental health goes a long way. But right now, let's say we treat someone who's mentally ill. They still would be able to legally have access to it because we can't have databases, so I would know the person's troubled. And until we get into a place where we can have more transparency on this, we're addressing the problem, but we're not solving or preventing the crime. And I think you're right. I think it's a huge part of it. Every person they're not well, and they have a gun. So if you address the first part of it, that's a big part of it, but they shouldn't be able to get a gun. I know we're heavy
mental
here.
Mental health doesn't always work. Gun control does.
Yeah, well,
Ask Australia. Gun control works.
Yeah, that part's true. After a tragedy, they changed everything. But the new gun laws, or the lack of them in the wake of Newtown, is a question that we ask you this week, especially as we approach that anniversary. What gun law changes did you think we would have nationally on the books here after Newtown. I thought we'd have more. And a year later, do you still really expect any more changes with how we've seen this whole climate evolve on this subject in the last calendar year? Please head over to Facebook and Twitter and make your opinion heard. And our special coverage of guns and gun issues in the wake of the Newtown anniversary, it will continue all week here on RFL. When we come back here, we will meet the Tea Partier who says the second most conservative in the U.S. Senate is not conservative enough. And trust me, this isn't the craziest thing this guy says. And also there's rumblings on the left that the Democrats aren't progressive enough here. What is going on for the parties here, and do they face challenges from their flanks? We'll be back on that as RFL continues.